umbrella with me, but
Fine, thank you.
so welcome back home to Toad.
Yeah, it's great.
Yes, no, Your Excellency, this is Jack Windier. You know your own staff, I think. Alicia Watson.
Hello.
Victor Windier.
Hello.
Bethany Bloomfield, who's one of our senior
Hello.
residents.
Nice to meet you.
And Michael Wellington is a community coordinator.
Hi, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yay! Datang ke kotamu,
lama niat tidak bertemu, ingin diriku mengulang kembali, berjalan-jalan bagai tahun lalu. Sepanjang jalan kenangan kita tak bergandeng tangan. Sepanjang jalan kenangan kau peluk diriku mesra. Hujan yang rintik-rintik di awal bulan itu menambah nikmatnya malam syahdu. Walau diriku kini telah berdua, dirimu pun tiada berbeda. Namun kenangan sepanjang jalan itu tak mungkin lepas dari ingatanku. Sepanjang jalan kenangan kita menambah nikmatnya malam syahdu.
Thank you very much. In terms of questions, that one of the things that a lot of people in this room would love to hear is what brought you to the ANU, and particularly what brought you to Toad Hall, and what was a little bit about your experience of coming to Toad Hall and what you remember of Toad Hall. Let's start with that, if we may.
Yeah, so I was under the Aus 8, so everything is arranged at the time, was arranged. So yes, it's the first dormitory that I know at the ANU, so I stay here.
Right. What was it like? Do you remember did you have a number of rooms, or did you?
I just remember the room had so many corners.
Yes. We go around and see. Yes.
So it's a bit confusing, but it's the uniqueness of this place.
Yeah.
I remember there's also many ducks around the Sullivan Creek.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
at the times, and many cockatoos. I think you have many
Cockatoos,
cockatoos.
yes.
Yeah.
We had somebody come from, I think, might have been Singapore, who was so disturbed by the loud screeching of a cockatoo, he wanted to shoot it. We said, no, that's not a good idea. Nevertheless, yes, so ducks and cockatoos.
And I remember there are many. I have a lot of Japanese friends in here. They love to cook fish, and this is the one that from time to time we have sirens comes, the fire breaches, because something always burns there.
Yes. That can be a common experience, I think, with
Until now, people still do that.
Yes, people still do that. Yeah. So how long did you live in Toad Hall during the period of your PhD study?
Yeah, so but toward the end of my study, when I get married, and then we moved to graduate house.
Oh, graduate house, so that's me this time. Yeah, right. Oh, well, there you are, Peter. We share the ambassador. You share more his wife. Actually.
Not sure where this is going. Eh?
No, we'll move on. Anyway, so this is a nice return home, and so
Yeah,
welcome
thank
both
you.
to Australia, Canberra, and back to the ANU and Toad Hall. You had done a Master of Laws degree at Monash University, and then here you did a PhD in political science. Were you thinking then, or were you involved then in the area of diplomacy and foreign affairs? What drew you into that work?
Yeah, at that time I got to take 10 undergraduate subjects in E, so we call it the bridging course.
Yes.
And then when I completed the course, I got the qualification of the postgraduate diploma.
Right.
And then I just would like to move to the city that is larger and have more life. Because at the time Canberra is so quiet. Yeah, from time to time I spend the night with friends in King O'Malley's. Yeah, until now they stay there. So I moved to Melbourne, to Clayton campus for my master's degree.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Right. And then after that, then back to the ANU for
Yeah, for
PhD.
my PhD and with my wife here.
Yes. Yeah.
But I have good friends too, to be honest.
All right. We won't talk too much about Monash, that's all right. But a great university and all that. So, and you're interested in diplomacy and international affairs and things of that nature when you completed your PhD, you returned to Indonesia and then became involved in.
Yeah, my before I came, no, it's after I finished my master's degree, the foreign ministry sent me to Bonn. It's the what we call it, the old capital, the new capital
Yes,
of Germany.
yes.
They have like West Germany. and
Bonn
Germany.
was the capital of.
Yeah, and then when I finished my first assignment in Bonn, I back to PNU and took my PhD.
Right.
Yeah, so I have like a break for
Right.
4 years to do my jobs in Germany.
So at that time you were already in diplomatic service
Yeah.
for Indonesia. And we're very fortunate in Toad that we often get some people who are already in the diplomatic work for their home countries and are having a study break and doing that while they.
When I was here, one of my Toadhallers mate was Penny William,
Penny William.
and she is now Australian ambassador in Jakarta. So
Oh right.
because we are from here.
Yes.
It's a bit funny that because I'm now there and it's an ambassador.
It's sort of,
Yes,
yes,
right.
it's swap, as it
Yeah,
were.
yeah.
Yeah, very good. Excellent. So she wasn't in Toad, was she? Was she?
Yeah, yes, yes.
She was a Toad in Toad. So the ambassador, the Australian ambassador to Indonesia, is a Toadie as well.
Yes, yes.
Well, tick these up because we turned 50. I don't, but we turned 50 in a couple of years' time. So it's very helpful to know these things. And I'm happy you'll probably still be ambassador when we have our Jubilee celebrations, and that's helpful. That is really
When
helpful.
did it be?
In 2024.
2024, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a year.
Yeah. So anyway, so there we go. Well, that's fascinating. So you've had quite an association with Australia, both in study and familiarity with Australia, and now you're back as the ambassador. I guess over the years, and I've got to say, I'm much older than the ambassador. And I can remember times when they were more difficult times in relationships between Australia and Indonesia. There have been some tough times and some difficult times, as well as really good times in relationship between our two countries, and of course Indonesia being our largest neighbour in that sense. I just wonder how you see, and I suppose it's how your government sees now the relationship between our two countries, and what might be some of the key aspects of that as you perceive the relationship between Australia and Indonesia.
Yeah, I think neighbors always has problems. That's why there's not only between Indonesia and Australia, we have problem with Malaysia as well, with neighboring countries. But the point is that despite of all the difficulty, it's normal. We have some improvement from time to time.
Yeah.
So now I think we have all of the political infrastructure intact in Indonesia and Australia with comprehensive strategic partnerships, and Indonesian Australian comprehensive economic partnership is also very important. Not only close neighbor, but we are partnered by choice.
Partners by choice.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. What do you see as perhaps particular aspects of the trading relationship between the two countries? I mean, I'm not really that fully aware of just how much Indonesia receives trade, export from Australia, and of course vice versa. So
Yeah, the
significance of
number
trading.
is like 7.8 billion or billion. We still have to visit with Australia, but the population narrowing. We start importing exporting car to Australia, so I think it's going to help a little bit more in narrowing our deficit, because this will be part of the global value chain, and investment goes both sides as well. So we also invest in Australia, Australia invests in Indonesia. So that's good things.
I hadn't thought of that's right.
Just like Bogor.
Yeah, just like Bogor, Andrew was saying, yes. I hadn't thought of Indonesia as a car manufacturing place and Indonesian cars coming to Australia. My German car is just carked and I don't have it at the moment. Maybe I need a one to Indonesia. Is that been a manufacturing?
Yes, this is a Japanese car, Toyota.
Oh right, okay.
70% of the production and the material is from Indonesia. So we have a local content of 70%.
Okay.
And that's good things.
Interesting. Right. This century has often been referred to as the Asian century. And I remember reading that in another interview there was a comment, or you made the comment that there was a misperception on the part of the United States and the European Union that the rise of Asia was really the rise of China, and you said no, that's wrong, that the rise of Asia is the rise of Asia. Can you explain that a little further and what you were meaning by that?
Yeah, like let's say 30 years ago, our economy, Indonesia, in terms of GDP to selling for parity is barely, let's say, 600 billion, but now 3.2 trillion US dollar. So this big, and this is also the case with ASEAN. If we combine Indonesia and the rest of ASEAN, it will be 5.5 trillion.
Well,
And conglomeration with China and India, this is working very huge shift in the global economies into East Asia. Yeah, but the point is that when we are talking about demographic bonus, and this will be Indonesia and India, it's no longer China. So in the future, because we have more young people, productions will be depends on the younger generation, and many of them study in Australia. So I think there's a good chance, not only the rise of Asia, but Asia and Oceania as well. Now, there are a lot of wariness on the case of the rise of Asia. We understand that, in particular on the so-called global order. We understand in the past we have the so-called European global order. Geneva Convention, Vienna Convention, all European name, the Hague rules. But then, after World War II, we have the new North America global order with Washington Consensus. The name is Washington Consensus, IMF World Bank. But now the fact that most of the economics conglomeration is with East Asia doesn't mean that we are going to have a visionary global order. But I believe it's more a little bit of adjustment, because Asia cannot rise without the help of the rest of the world. If we compare, you look at this, the nature of the rise of Asia is the economic powerhouse, is the manufacturing powers. But if you look at the GDP, at the state budget, the one allocated for research and development is pretty small. Yeah. The largest might be Korea, but if you look at North America, they spend like 4% of the GDP for research and development. This might be the case with Europe. Asia can be less than 1% for developing economy. So dependency or the need on the cooperation of technology with North America and Western Europe is such that this is the way we need to cooperate. Yeah. So the market is still North America and Europe as well. So the rise of Asia, I believe, will be very much engaging with the global partnership with Western Europe and North America.
Indonesia will grow to be an economy that's substantial in the world. We live in a region whereby in the future we will have China, India and Indonesia as giants. We need to strengthen that economic partnership.
You will be relating to a range of economies and building strength on that. It's not just looking to one or a couple in particular.
There was also something important that we need to understand when we are talking about global order European version or global order or North American version. This is developed economies. And if we are talking about East Asia, the rise of Asia is the rise of developing economies.
Right.
So we have still a lot of fragility, vulnerability. That's why cooperation will be the key for us. If we look at the history of pandemics, for instance, normally every 100 years we have one pandemic, but now in the last 20 years we have 5 pandemics all at the same time, from HIV/AIDS until what we have now, COVID. Actually, we have 5 pandemics at the same time.
Yeah.
So if we look at the GDP combined of the G20, 45% is actually from developing countries now. But if you go back 20 years ago, Asia is barely 28%, another North America is 30%, Europe 25%, but now Asia is 45%, Europe down to 22%, or America is 25%. So we can imagining like we have 3 rockets. European rocket perhaps small, but they have a very thick basis, very stable one. Or North America with a medium-sized rocket, but also very big basis. But the developing countries, the rocket might be big, but the basis is a bit thin.
Yeah.
That's why we have a lot of students to study in Australia, in Japan, China, or Korea. This is a process that our basis will be thicker a bit, so the rocket can be launched safely. So this is the particular characteristic of today's world order, with a lot of part of the economic from developing countries, with a lot of vulnerability. So the keyword will be partnership and cooperation, either among developing countries and also developing economies.
I don't know the figure now, but do you see a development of more, if possible, Australian students perhaps studying in Indonesia?
I think this is the best way. I mean, in the past, Asia sent more students to study in Australia, but understanding the nature of the rise of Asia, the new colonial plan is, I think, is the best option. That we have more young people from Australia to study not only in Indonesia but also in Vietnam, or in the Philippines, or India, or Bangladesh, to understand more about the potential of Asia to be a good partner. For the future development.
That being a program that was strongly developed by our Chancellor, Julie Bishop, when she was Minister for Education, I think, before being Foreign Minister. And so we might hear more about that as we have our Chancellor here in this situation in a couple of weeks' time, we hope.
She's going to speak.
She's going to be sitting there where you're sitting, and we hope to we can flesh that one out a little bit more as well. Indonesia really is sitting in the almost geographic middle of the Indo-Pacific region, particularly. We've been talking about the world, but particularly the Indo-Pacific region. A lot of talk about that and the significance of this region now. People talking about China, of course, and how its interests are. But thinking of the Pacific and your role too as ambassador to Vanuatu, how do you, your view, Indonesia's view about the significance, perhaps the increasing significance of the Pacific and Pacific nations, the island nations of the Pacific?
Yeah, we share characteristic with most of the Pacific island countries because we are archipelago and most of them also archipelago. So, and we have the same potential threat, it's global warming.
Yes.
We are predicting like 10%, 15% of our island will be underwater if we cannot maintain this challenge together. So I think cooperation with the Pacific will be very, very important. Sharing knowledge. I visited a lot of the Pacific islands. I've been teaching before in Fiji and Solomon and Papua New Guinea, the beautiful countries. So we have challenge together, but at the same time also we need to have more cooperation on the natural resources. For instance, we are talking. My master's degree is on the deep water fisheries in the Pacific, especially migratory species of tuna. And yeah, and this is the same message that we need to have more sustainable development under the UN SDGs, life in the water, for instance. So this is binding us together between Asia and Oceania. But we need also technology, and the most advanced countries in Oceania is Australia and New Zealand. So sharing technology will be very, very important.
Right. Well, that's obviously something that's going to develop a lot more in the future, and of course we have Josie from Vanuatu, but just before your time, I think, Ralph Reagan-Barnett, who was recently the foreign minister of Vanuatu, was a Toady as well. So we've got connections in that area, and looking to build that. We're very fortunate to have Pacifica people here as well as people from your country and others. We'll get to questions in a moment from people. There'll be a time for that. I'm just wondering, in your time as ambassador here, is there any particular thing or things that you're looking particularly to foster, to develop, so that when you leave, you think, well, that's something that you've been able to develop in your time as ambassador?
Yeah, my priority is economic diplomacy. I think it's very important for everyone. In the Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership, we have a notion called economic powerhouse. And it's very important, like a joint production between Australia and Indonesia. Let's say you have lithium, we have nickels, and then electric car will be a shared dream between Australia and Indonesia together, providing batteries. I have spoken with Sun Cable, for instance, selling the solar panels and solar energy from Australia all the way to Singapore, and then through the ASEAN grid can be end up in Vietnam, Philippines. This is the three things that we need to do together. It's like first we are talking about the enemy, we are talking about the global health, and Australia is going to be hub for the vaccine protection. Indonesia will also be hub of the vaccine protection. We have a good pharmaceutical industry in Indonesia. So cooperation on that will be important for the global south. This will be our future market there. So normally we look at north, that means China, Japan, Korea. But it's time to look more on the Pacific all the way to Latin America, or to Indian Ocean all the way to Africa. This will be the new market, because we learned that in the eastern coast of Africa, they have the so-called fast-growing countries. Economic development is really very fast, but they still need vaccines, not only for human but also animal. Now we have lumpy skin disease for cattle, and Australia have a lot with vaccine to us. Number two is on the digital transformation. Now we have like Bukalapak, they have the technological hub in Melbourne, and soon also in Sydney. And last but not least, it's also very important is energy transition. I talked with Andrew Forrest. It's a dream of green hydrogen, for instance, to feed the energy and the fast-growing economic power of Asia. So this is the good things. Now the idea of a powerhouse is this: like Indonesia has a lot of champion products. So for instance, like footwear or garment and stuff. And furniture is one of our strong production, but you also have good in design. So it can be that one day made in Indonesia and design in Australia. So this is the shared thing. If we are talking about manufacturing that engage involving labors, 60% can be done in Indonesia, and when it involves design, technology, packaging, the other 70% can be done here in Australia. And then we can have the rule of origin, and we can go all the way, because you have FTA with America, for instance. It will be considered as Australian product. You can get the product and go all the way to the United States or Bangladesh, because you also have PTA with Bangladesh. Likewise, we also have FTA with many countries, and the project can go from Australia to Indonesia and other countries as well. So this is always my dream, to start with something like that.
Yeah, great. Well, we'll have some questions from our audience. I just did want to say, you've been a very short time so far as ambassador. Is there anything you're particularly starting to enjoy and like about being an ambassador? I'm sure it's got many challenges and many difficulties, but is there anything you particularly are starting to enjoy about being?
Yeah, when I finished my study in 2003. So at that time, we don't have much breweries or winery around Canberra. Now we have local production. So I love to do wine tasting and eating cheese.
There you go, right. Okay, so a few visits in that way, that would be wonderful. There's some wonderful wineries that's around.
Yeah, the Pinot Noir from the locality here also very nice.
Yes, including the Vice Chancellors. All that.
It's just funny that I invite Australian guests, mostly from Tibet, to have dinner into my residence, and my wife cooked rendang, and I called Penny William like, Penny, what is your suggestion? What is the best wine to with rendang? And he told me like, Pinot Noir, try Pinot Noir.
Yeah, right. Lovely. Really good. Well, thank you. And some questions from our resident audience. If people would like to ask a question, now is an opportunity. Don't always get an opportunity to ask an ambassador questions. So, yes, let's go. And if you're asking a question, just please speak up.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. So I just because you have experience so far, right, until this point, I just wonder like, what do you think? Like, what should we do as a student here? Since like there's like 24 students from Indonesia here. What should we do to make the most out of Toadhallers? What do you think? What should we do?
Just don't write.
I think it's too much Indonesian and Toadhallers. They got to do. Give a chance to
That's a good suggestion.
My impression is that
Bahasa Inggrisnya nggak
study
jalan
in
nanti.
Australia is not only learning things, but building networking is very, very important. Like my case with Annie or Kevin. Kevin's now also my classmate. He used to be a classmate at the law school here at ANU, and now he is the chair of Indonesia Australia Center in Jakarta. So networking like this is also very important because in here you also have Indian students or the Pacific students. So in the Pacific, that upward mobility is very fast, and when 10 years from now, they can be a minister. So while we are still struggling to be an ambassador, but they already a minister. So I think it's good that we building networking from the very beginning is as important as the study itself. Yeah.
Good.
And it's good too much wasting too much time for the thesis. Like, make a friend as possible. I think it's the key thing. It's very important to have more friends.
Yeah, that's very good answer.
She's doing exactly that.
Yeah.
We will try.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a great place to make friends from across the globe.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
one of
yeah.
the really important things to connect with people from wherever.
Yeah,
Peter, yeah.
but I'd just like to say, Ambassador, it's good to encourage students to not spend all their time studying, to spend some time studying. I'm interested, you would have seen the results of the most recent Lagu poll about Indonesians' attitude to Australia, and I think when we have similar polls here, it shows very much the same, that many Indonesians are not so sure about Australia, whether it's a friendly country or not. And historically, many Australians haven't been very sure about Indonesia either. And it just seems to be such a long, for many decades, situation. So apart from Colombo playing New Colombo plan and having total all Indonesians, what do you think about the nature of the sort of relationship between the two countries and how we advance?
Yeah, so we understand that understanding culture is very difficult, sometimes very tricky. That is one of my missions to revive again Indonesian language in Australia, because to understand Australia, we learn Australian language. It's quite different with English. But to understand Indonesia, we need to learn bahasa.
Yeah.
Because if we, of course now we have Google Translate. This thing is not really very good because then you don't have a chance to learn the very fundamental structure of the language is the culture. And learning bahasa, I think the way we promote bahasa need to be changed a little bit. In the past, we know Indonesia as the ancient kingdoms and with all of the cultures, but now young people need to be engaged differently. Like your work will be in Indonesia, investment will be in Indonesia, and the young people from Indonesia understand that the future investment will be in Australia. So, for instance, we did some macroeconomic studies. We understand that agriculture sectors in Australia, we call it the situations like the sunset industry, while Indonesia is sunrise. But at the same time, if we are talking about furniture, Indonesia is a bit sunset now. We need more design for it. So, engaging the two young people, understanding the other as the opportunity for them to work, then it will encourage them more to understand the culture they are going to work with. And so
maybe more songs like this one.
yeah. It's not only about the food, but also how that one day we can have like canned food from Indonesia or food industry and beverage, for instance. So promoting Australia as the new market for Indonesian, or Indonesia as the new market for Australian, young Australian, I think is the way we promote the Australian language and Indonesian language.
It's interesting that when I started teaching in high schools that Indonesian was a major course of study. People learning the Indonesian language, and it just seems to have died. I mean, your aim to try and encourage that again. I mean, it's our largest, most significant neighbour, and there was a lot of study of Indonesia at that time. It was a major part of language departments, and it just seems to have, faded away a bit. So that would be really good. Yeah.
But talking about Louis is so very important. There are two things. The first one is the thermometer that they have it every year, the annual survey, and the last one is on the way Indonesia see the world. It's also very interesting. But I believe on the thermometer, this is a big concern. This is the homework for all students here, because when I see the statistic from the last 10 years, from the thermometers, Indonesia is always at the bottom still until now. Yeah. I don't know, we need more creativity to make Australia more interested in Indonesia. Yeah. But at the same time, we also need to encourage more young people to see more Australia, because we are concentrated more. Now more young people study in Korea because they love BTS. So permission to dance, and they perform in the UN. I think it's done on both sides. Yes.
Yeah.
But perception of Indonesia is really very, very low in the last 10 years.
Yeah. Any other questions? Campbell?
Thank you, Ambassador, for such a very interesting talk. I picked up early on that you had spent some time in Bonn, and I wondered whether you might reflect for a moment about the difference between German society and Australian society in relation to Indonesia. What do Germans make of Indonesia? We've talked a bit about what Australians make of Indonesia, but what do Germans think? What is the contrast in your experience between the two situations?
Yes, about Uber alles and Ultra alles. The first one is geography. Yeah. I think the Germans, just like the rest of European Union, if we look at the pattern of investment, Europe invests in Europe. Yeah. While the nature of investment in East Asia is coming from all over Europe and all over North America, all over the world, I mean. Yeah. So there's more variety in here. So on the closeness by heart, it's actually we fortunate we have Habibie become the president of Indonesia and graduate from Europe, for instance, from Germany. Before that, we know partly that our economy is from partly because partly mafia from the United States. So hopefully we need to have more advertisement. And we have great leaders educated in Australia as well. So, but they are not really well known by our community. Mahendra Sirkar will be the chair of the finance OJK. What is it?
Finance office.
Yeah, Mari Pangestu and all of this is the elites in Indonesia that were educated in Australia. So we need more advertisement on these people. Yeah.
Mari Pangestu is a toady.
Yeah.
Now
And the other thing is that we have Mercedes, we don't have Odin anymore.
Right. Anyone else? Yes.
Siswo, I was wondering what's your opinion on what do you have in your mind about the issue that among Australians, like the only thing they could remember about Indonesia is Bali, and that's it. And do you have any ideas on how to improve this kind of notion that other than Bali, there's more something more about Indonesia, I guess, other than Bali?
Yeah, this is why during the G20 we try to introduce beyond Bali. And it's funny because the delegation of the senior official meeting, like they have request, why don't we meet in Raja Ampat or Labuan Bajo? So we have these programs, conference outside Bali, but still, since the nature of connectivities, that Bali is still the regional favorite for Australia. 90% of this 1.5 million Australia choose Bali as the first destination. Then from Bali, they spread out to Kiblat, to Makassar, to Sumatra. Yeah. But still, Bali is still a favorite. I think because Bali is beautiful, isn't it? I spent holiday in Bali too. Yeah, but we introduce more, I think, with New Colombo plan, more young Australia studying Makassar or Ambon.
So you're hoping that we can sort of get, there was a lot of tourism, there's a lot of tourism to Bali, but COVID has interrupted that obviously, but you're hoping that we can get beyond that awful incident of the bombing and not see Indonesia in terms of that kind of incident.
Yeah, and probably just like sometimes it's a bit tiring that when I have to be honest, it's a bit weird that Indonesia is the fourth biggest population, population-wise, it's the fourth biggest in the world. But every time I meet someone, it's like, where are you from? I'm from Indonesia. Oh, where is it? And it's like it's a bit weird that we are the fourth biggest population-wise, but it's like our existence is like almost invisible sometimes.
Yeah. Perhaps people also confused with Indonesia, Polynesia. This is like So they think this is a region rather than a country. Melanesia, Micronesia.